Hello, John Owens here, and today I'd like to talk to you about one of those GDPR stats that's out there, which says that 80% of all those businesses that ought to be GDPR compliant are not. Amazing, isn't it? Only 20% are GDPR compliant. And now, talking to businesses in various countries around the world, the reason that keep coming up when we're talking to people who are not GDPR compliant are, one, the business owners don't care. Two, GDPR is just too complex for small to medium business to understand. And three, GDPR is far too expensive to implement. Well, let's look at these three things in turn. The business owners don't care. Now, I've heard this a lot from businesses in Australia and New Zealand, and they say, we're too small, we're so far away, we're the other side of the world, the EU isn't going to bother coming halfway around the world to prosecute us. Well, it's not going to be the EU that comes after you. In fact, it's going to be the local regulators who have got agreements in place with the EU to implement GDPR in Australia and New Zealand and lots of other countries on their behalf. So not caring is not much of an excuse, because not caring doesn't make the fines any less. You know, you can care, they're $23 million US dollars, or you cannot care. They're still up to $23 million US dollars. Now, what about point two? GDPR is too complex. Well, we can definitely understand why people should think this. As a small business ourselves, when we first started looking at GDPR, it was one of those mind-boggling things. We thought, how can any small business possibly understand this? But then we spoke to two people in our network who are very GDPR savvy. The first was Darragh O'Brien of Castlebridge in Dublin, and the second was Axel Troika of Grandite in Quebec. And having spoken to both of these people who have a gift for understanding and looking at complex and bringing out the simplicity, we saw that, in fact, GDPR is essentially simple. Now, if you want to look for the complexity in GDPR, you will find it, and I'm sure if you read a lot of things in the press, it'll tell you all about the complexity. But for the average business, it's finding out the simplicity, because that's what allows you to implement it, not the complexity. And we found if you're gathering, collecting or using personal information of individuals located within the European Economic Area, then very simple, you can only gather the information you need in order to perform the contract of the task. You've got to have the permission. When you gather it, you can only use it for what you gathered it for, not something else. There are limits on how long you can keep it, how you have to delete it, make sure you delete it properly. When it is in your care, you're responsible for it. So you can't say, if something goes wrong with it, you're responsible and you'll have to face the consequences. And you can't use the excuse, as I've heard lots of people do, saying, oh, we use third party to process this information on our behalf. No, if you're collecting the information, you're responsible, and the people you're using to process on your behalf, you've got to make sure that they are GDPR compliant. So if they're not GDPR compliant, you're in breach. So when you break it down, it's very simple, it's not complicated. And by getting rid of the complexity, we were able to do this in our business, and we created for ourselves so that we could follow it all the way through from one end of our business to the other, a simple 5-step approach to GDPR. Now, we come to the last point, that GDPR is too expensive to implement. Well, once you dispel the myth too that it's too complex, guess what? The myth about it being too expensive drops away, because it's not. And again, by using the approach that we took in our business, that 5-step approach, it's not expensive at all. You don't need, a lot of people have a fear about having to employ expensive external consultants to implement GDPR on their behalf. No need. The average common sense business owner can implement GDPR very successfully by following our 5-step approach. And to all our connections on LinkedIn, we're actually making this 5-step approach. We've turned it into an online course and put it on Udemy, and we're making it available free of charge to all LinkedIn members you simply have to click on the link that I've put in the comment field below, and it'll take you through. When you get to Udemy website, simply click on enroll now and you'll begin. Go in, have a look. Don't just have a look though. Go in, use it and implement GDPR in your business. Definitely worthwhile because it can save you up to 23 million US dollars. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye bye.